Look at that. It's
All
a
right.
beautiful thing. Corey, the engineer Berg, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Alan. Continuing along my therapy to make my eyeballs look at the camera instead of at you over here.
Yeah, move me
Marginally
over
successful.
there. That's what I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. I try to
Move
put
you
the
in.
window close to the webcam.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense.
There's an entire new vertical of product with the dogly eyes right above your PC's webcam to make you focus there.
Yeah.
Distract you from the screen that your face is actually on. And pretty
Got
soon
it.
our whole society is going to just devolve to where we're looking over in the corner and nobody makes eye contact when you're in person anymore. This is what it's training us to do.
I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah, me neither.
Not looking forward to that, but it's probably coming. So let's tell whoever decides to watch this, listen to this, or even join us now, what the concept behind recruiter or engineer versus recruiter is. Our concept, and it's interesting, Corey, because you made a comment to someone on LinkedIn earlier today about this series that you and I are doing of engineer versus recruiter, and let them know it doesn't have to be contentious. It just doesn't have to be. Yes, I understand. As a recruiter, I get that there are plenty of people that do what I do for a living who are not good at it. And maybe there's days when I'm not good at it. There's days when I call people I shouldn't call about opportunities that they're not qualified for, or maybe way overqualified for. There are days when I reach out to people knowing fully well that they're probably $200,000 a year, and I've got a job that's $60,000 a year. That happens. It happens. I'm not proud of it, but it happens. Maybe I'm calling them to ask them if they know someone who they've mentored. Maybe I'm calling them to ask them, hey, back when you were looking to get to the $200,000 level, what did you do when you were making 60? That, I can try to backtrack and look down that chain of events and find the person ideally that I'm looking for at this stage in their career. Maybe I'm not calling you with the reason that you think I'm calling you for, but if you gave me the time of day, if you gave me an opportunity to just say my piece, maybe that's not such a bad thing. But we've made the industry so adverse to taking our calls and so anti-recruiter that we oftentimes don't even get that opportunity to have that conversation any longer.
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at this, the LinkedIn post that you're talking about, it was actually a tech guy, looks like a software guy, that kind of says, hey, just be nice to recruiters. And a guy, expressed his opinion that he's very frustrated. It sounds like he's had a lot of run-ins with this. That's the way I interpreted it, just from the passion in his response. And I get it. I mean, I personally get spammed over LinkedIn quite a bit by I don't know who it is, if it's bots or if it's just automated marketing from companies, if these people are real or not. It just looks like it's from outer space. Like they clearly didn't read my profile. They clearly didn't look at anything. It's just spammy, right? And I think when you get deluged with that stuff, I'm not trying to justify treating people badly, because for me, that says more about the person treating the person badly than it does anything else. But I can understand how in the deluge of getting pinged by recruiters, how it would get frustrating after a while, and just to have to deal with it all without having an assistant to filter it out, right? Like tech people fall all over the introvert extrovert spectrum, but there are a lot of introverts in tech, and there are some good reasons for that, and there's some reasons and pros and cons all over the place for that spectrum and the characteristics and value they bring. But especially on the introverts, when you interrupt the stream of consciousness of a tech person, it's hard to get back into the flow state. So when I read this person's response, I was thinking he's probably been interrupted one too many times today, and he's just peeling off an angry response. Rah! Send, just don't hit that button is what I coach people. Don't, if you're sitting there waiting with bated breath to pounce on something, you probably need to take a walk. Don't hit the button. But there's clearly some angst behind it. And yeah, I've definitely seen the attitude that is just, okay, I'm just sick of this because it seems like nobody's listening. It's just spammy and that's it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how prevalent that is. This person mentions fake job ads. And I know in the past I've seen companies that are more posting ads to gather resumes. I don't know if there's a term for that in the recruiting space, but I'm not sure that still happens. You see fake job ads?
No. I mean, I will say that we post ads that maybe we know we're going to need 10 clients are looking for this person. So we may have an ad that's posted to attract that talent for those 10 different clients. So maybe, that could be, I guess, interpreted as a fake job ad because it's not for a specific client. It's for a variety of clients that are looking for the same or similar thing.
I see.
Maybe that's what he's talking about. I mean, I know back when I started in this industry back in the late 90s. And I know back then, when I first started, there was certainly I guess, some common thread in our industry of, we're going to need these people. So we don't have that role yet, but we're going to need them. So let's post an ad as if we have it. And then we'll start to, gather resumes and gather people. I also don't necessarily think, I mean, in my personal opinion, as a recruiter, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think if you're a bad recruiter and you don't know how to have a conversation with somebody about why that position is posted that way, or if it's not posted in a way of, this is an opportunity that we know is going to come our way, but we don't have yet, then you're certainly treading, some treacherous waters, I would say. It all depends on how you post it. It all depends on that initial conversation, in my opinion. But I haven't seen what that person would call fake job ads.
So do you think it would be, or does anybody disclose if you post? I've never seen this done, so maybe this is a dumb question, but if you post an ad we have multiple clients, do you ever say on the ad that it's for multiple opportunities?
I don't think we ever have.
Huh.
I don't think we ever have.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I don't know if that would, in your opinion, as a person who gets called by a lot of recruiters, would that make a difference to you? Would you see that as a good or a bad? Or
I think it's actually, I mean, for me, I always think more information is better. And for me, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because I'd want to know, again, if I was working for, with someone else in the space, I would want to know if there's cross-contamination of my resume, right? So right. I would want to know if it was targeted for multiple clients, and I would want to know if there's if you're filling pipeline versus if there's something real. For me, that's an important piece of information, and I would be hesitant. Maybe this is why it's not done. I would be hesitant to post it unless I had a personal relationship with the recruiter like you. I'd be hesitant to send it if I knew that it was a pipeline builder.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm guessing that if I were in this fellow's shoes who was posting the LinkedIn article, obviously frustrated. Maybe that's what he's referring to. He talks about ghosting. So I think it does come down to how do we float the boats of the feedback mechanics from the recruitment side, from the HR side, and all of the downstream groups that are involved in a process like this.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's probably ultimately what it gets back to. I would venture to guess that person is seeing the ghosting as the bigger piece of the challenge, and maybe it's the fake job posting that he believes is fake because they ghosted him afterwards. Potentially, I don't know. They were, like you said, pipelining him, and they determined in that conversation that he wasn't worth pipelining, and therefore they just never called him again, which again is not by any stretch of the imagination, for any recruiter who's listening to this, a good way to go about this industry. That is absolutely positively the worst way to go about building any sort of sustainable business in this industry.
Do you think that that pattern is more common? Like, do people just start up a recruitment shop and shut it down? Is it that temporal, or is it just people that are trying to, that join a company and are trying to make their way in the business, and then they just fall out of it like it's a real estate
there's all
economy?
kinds of issues. Yeah, there's all kinds of issues in our industry, Corey. I would say one of the biggest issues in our industry is when we bring on new people, we focus on the wrong metric. So the metric that is focused on in our industry is number of calls. So we say as a new recruiter, you need to talk to a lot of people. Well, what am I going to say to them? Doesn't matter. Just talk to as many people as you can and start to get in conversations and start to have these conversations. We'll teach you what you say along the way, but right now, just engage in conversation. Talk to them about what they do, why they do it, why they got into what they're into, all of those sorts of things. Now, oftentimes they'll give them a job description and say, just call them about this job, and they'll give them details and they'll give them questions, but they're held to the metric of connecting with as many people as humanly possible.
That's regardless of the follow through, regardless of the depth of the communication. It's just call them.
Exactly. Just call. Dial as many people as you can.
It seems very unsophisticated.
Yep. Yeah, and that was the metric when I first started, and that I know is the metric still today. So that's the first problem. The second problem is we're not told, as a rookie recruiter, or in a lot of agencies as rookie recruiters, you're not told where to take those conversations. So, see whether or not you like that person, see whether or not they seem to have a good rapport, see whether or not, they'd be interested in moving, if they fit within this dollar range that we're targeting. Just, find out what dollar range they currently make. And then report all of that back to us as your leadership team. And then we'll tell you who we may move forward with and who we may not move forward with. It's a very arcane way of doing things. And to your point, not a good way.
Yeah, it doesn't, I don't think it, so maybe that's part of the systemic problem that needs to get improved, because that tends to lead itself directly to these kind of problems, right? It's
absolutely.
So there's no follow-up, there's no incentive to follow up. But I would think even as a rookie, you would understand that this is about relationship building and not necessarily about just a one-hit conversation.
No, as rookies, you don't necessarily know that. You don't necessarily know that. I mean, as a rookie, you're told this is what you do and this is how you become successful. And you see other people on the phone having conversations, and unfortunately, you're in that position of, well, if everybody else here is doing it, it's like, that's one of the primary reasons we have such a negative reputation as recruiters, is because, I've written articles about it. There's so many rookie drivers on the road of recruiting, and they're just crashing into people. They're making wrong way turns. They're speeding in school zones. I mean, they're breaking all the rules of basic human decency in recruiting, and making it a horrible roadway for all the rest of us who want to follow the rules of the road.
That's awful, Alan. Jeez, what do we do about it?
Well, I have conversations like this, and our buddy Nick Morrison, saying amen. I mean, hopefully, I'm guessing that was in response to the fact that this is one of the systemic problems. If you as a person who is ever looking for a job knew that, I don't know if that changes your opinion, if that changes the way you would answer the phone when it's a brand new recruiter. But I know when I first started, again, in the late 90s, when I first started, I would have people ask me, how long have you been doing this? What can I educate you on with regards to what I do? It was a different time. So when I called people back then, they were like, what do you need to know about me and what I do to make it easier for you to sell me to your client?
Interesting.
And the whole
I don't think
dynamic
people ask that. Like, people don't ask that anymore. I guess when you talk about this, I'm drawing the analogy to if I had to go have surgery, the last thing I want to hear is, oh my God, it's my first surgery. I'm so looking forward to doing my first surgery on you. But if we're driving on the highway, right, crashing into each other on the road is a good example. You have to get a license.
Yep.
What should we educate the software side and say, ask how much experience the recruiter has, and don't deal with them, or you're taking your chances if it's under 5 years, or do we educate the newbies in having better practices, or both?
Exactly, both. You're gonna have the guy on LinkedIn who's gonna be pissed off if somebody calls him with less than 5 years of experience in recruiting. And then you're gonna have those like the ones I ran into when I first started who said, what can I do to help you understand what it is I do for a living to make you, sell me to your client better. I was very, very fortunate to start when I started because people wanted to help me help them. They wanted me to be equipped with information to better present them to my clients. And that doesn't exist today. Now, it may exist because there's way too many cars on the road. Back when I first started, it was still not an industry flooded with people. It was still an industry that people were just starting to figure out, oh my gosh, this is like a really cool job and a really cool industry for me to be in.
Yeah.
But now it's, the cat's out of the bag. I mean, everybody knows this is a pretty great industry to be in for a whole bunch of reasons. So there's no more, when you tell people you're a recruiter, you're going to get one or the other. You're going to get, I don't want to talk to you, or how long have you been doing that?
Right. You're going to get, oh God, another one. Here's another one.
Yep.
Mercy. So, I mean, I come back to the doodly idea we had earlier. Like, let's do some educating on the way this actually works mechanically.
Sure.
And then we do some educating on how to best treat it to avoid the kind of scenario that my friend here on LinkedIn is heard about. So maybe from the software side, I can help educate and say, hey, look, when a recruiter calls you, it's not much you can do with LinkedIn spam, but if you're talking to a recruiter, here is the framework you can set up to make sure you have a positive outcome.
Yep.
Or to terminate the conversation.
Yeah, and you make that choice, obviously, anytime a recruiter calls you make the choice whether or not the conversation continues or you terminate.
Yeah.
And that doesn't need to change. We're not doing this to try to make it easier for recruiters. We're doing this to try to make it better and easier and more amicable for all.
Yeah.
Period.
But what I'm saying what I mean when I say that is, like, how would you, like, if you called me and I don't know you, right? The only way I know to ask that stuff is that I've been through this before, right?
Sure.
So I would be saying, okay, what areas do you specialize in? Are you local or are you regional? Yeah, tell me about. I actually was on the phone with a recruiter yesterday. She was telling me about a role, and at the end she said, "Do you have any questions?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to know about you. Area code New York. Okay. Tell me about how many years you've been in the recruiting space." She was actually kind of surprised that I went there. Right. So by the end of the call, I know this person a lot better than I did before. And I understood kind of the more complete picture behind, how she would interact with me. But the only reason I went there is because I've been doing this a while. If I were 10 years ago, maybe even, or 15 years ago, I don't think I would have necessarily been asking what I asked. So what would you recommend if you and I were approaching this without having known each other? What should I say to filter you out if it was your first time out of the gate?
Sure. Well, I think exactly what you just said, but I would probably do it earlier in the conversation. Yeah. So my advice to people, it's kind of like the job descriptions. Okay. When a job description is written in the format of, this is what we need you to do for us, and here's a little tiny bit about who we are, that's a bad job description. When the job description is written, here's what we're hoping you are looking to do, and here's what you've done, and here's where your career currently stands, and here's why we need you, and here's a little bit about us. That to me is a much better written job description. And in a recruiter's world, I would say that's a much better approach too. So me as a recruiter, I would call you and try to educate you as much as I could as to who we are, what we recruit for, why we're calling you, or why I'm calling you specifically based on the resume that I'm looking at, a LinkedIn profile or whatever. And then ask you, anything that I've said right now, Corey, strike a chord with you to make you want to work with me.
And I wouldn't necessarily have enough information based on what you said to answer that question without knowing
Sure.
your approach also. Right? Like I'd want to know your approach. For example, when we talked about feedback, right?
Yep.
If you turn around and said, and by the way, just so you know, here's how I work. There's these 3 tiers to the relationship. Sometimes we don't get feedback through this process from HR, but either way, I'm going to give you feedback. Okay, clear. I know you're not going to ghost me. Right
Yep.
there, because engineer brain wants to hear the method. Right?
Yep.
So I like what you said. So job description structured, I think, more in tune with the audience than you currently see them. And then, by the way, here's how we work as recruiters, and that's, for me, that carries a ton of weight. And that would be like, okay, I would favor someone who said that versus someone who gave me very little context for how they approach their side.
Or somebody who immediately starts firing questions at you.
Yeah.
That to me is kind of old style recruiting too. If I get you on the phone and I immediately start saying, immediately start peppering you with questions versus educating you on why I'm calling you.
Yeah.
That's not always a great approach, especially someone as tenured as you.
Yeah, I agree.
Sometimes you have to force the communication with somebody who's either brand new to the industry or very young in their career because they haven't engaged in those conversations before.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of rookie drivers, and they don't know when you're driving in this part of town versus that part of town versus that part of town that you may want to take different approaches with different drivers.
Okay, so I think there's something tangible there that we could take away and describe as maybe a methodology for dealing with this.
I agree.
Sort of like I recently wrote 6 steps to delegation to make delegation processes more successful. I think we could actually capture this as a methodology.
Nice. And I owe you the methodology that we have.
Yeah, I volunteered to write the doodly, and I can do that. We'll put it on YouTube. It'll get at least 10 viewers.
I like it.
And those will be 10 people we know, but it's a start.
and each of us. So it'll be 8 people we know and us.
Yeah, this is a good topic. It's a tough one. I think it's education on both sides, as you said.
It is. I mean, I think, like you said earlier, if an engineer or anyone for that matter says, how long have you been recruiting? Then based on that answer, they may decide to say, I'm done. Or they may decide to say, how can I help you? If that person's, a year or less, or 5 years or less, or 8 years or less, or whatever, the candidate at that point in time or the prospect can make the decision. I don't want to talk to you because you're too young in your career.
Yeah. So maybe you would say, with all due respect, I've been doing this a long time, and I think this is just not the relationship I think that will work. Maybe call me when you've done this for a few years. It's just I've been through this before, blah blah blah. You don't really have to justify it, but
exactly,
I feel like doing it a little bit humanely is a good thing. Because karma comes back on us all. So yeah, I think that's probably something we could do a better job of educating ourselves on the software side about. Because somebody calls you doesn't mean you have to engage with them. And if you set that context and set the expectation initially, you can probably negate the experiences that this poor fellow on LinkedIn has obviously had.
Right. Or like yourself, you could say, I'm gonna educate this person. I'm gonna help this person.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have a conversation with somebody who's been doing this less than a year, and maybe share with them experiences that I've had with recruiters that will make them more successful much faster than if all they do is listen to the people that are sitting around them in that bullpen telling them to get on the phone.
You think it's really a bullpen environment, like a boiler room?
Well, I don't think it is anymore. So I don't know how it's being done today, because I know what it was like when I first started, and it was definitely a boiler room.
Wow.
100%. I mean, I was sitting in a cube, no bigger than the size of my desk. In fact, much smaller than the size of my desk that I'm at right now. And right next to me in that cube over there, and right next to me in that cube over there, were other people on the phone calling candidates.
Just dialing 100% of the time.
Dialing 100% of the time. and we had daily activity reviews. We'd have to go through our numbers and the number of calls and the number of connects and the number of messages and all of those things. And I mean, that's just how it started. That's how I started.
Wow. Yeah, because I can see where some education goes a long way here.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, it was quantity over quality. And unfortunately, I think there's probably still a lot of quantity over quality these days.
Yeah, unfortunate. But well, let's see what happens with this. But let's do follow up and record some of this. I think it would be a good value add, certainly to myself and some of my colleagues, and certainly some of the younger folks that are now dealing with this kind of thing. I think it would help.
Yeah. No, I mean, if that comes out of this series that we're doing, I think that's going to be hugely helpful. If we can say, how do we relate to one another? I mean, how much better can it get than that?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's move this forward.
I love it, Alan.
Right on, Corey.
Float the boats.
Excellent. Well, we'll end it there because I know you've got to run to your meeting, and we'll end the broadcast there. And we appreciate everyone who was here, and hopefully you got some value out of it. Thanks again, buddy.
Thanks for anyone tuning in. Thank you, Alan. See you soon.